What is wine? What is wine? Boom. What is wine? Wine is a fermented beverage made from grapes. And just like anything good, we're gonna get a little semantic-y to start. Wine can really be made from any fruit. So you can see blueberry wine. Not saying you wanna drink blueberry wine, but that is technically wine. Camera guy Mike called blueberry wine a tasty beverage. Take that for what it is. So it can be made from any fruit, but if it says wine on the label, it is made from grapes. There are two main kinds of grapes. There are red grapes and white grapes. If you were to look at red grapes and white grapes together, the inside looks very similar. The biggest difference is obviously what they look like, the color of them. And within the red grapes, you get that pigmentation that makes it red, as well as tannins. Tannins are compounds that contain anthocyanins, polyphenols. It's the thing in wine that's either really good for you or will completely kill you. To drive this point home, let's actually look at some grapes. So these are technically Concord grapes, and you can make wine out of this, but Concord grapes are very similar to what wine grapes actually look like. And wine grapes are very different than what you get at the grocery store. Let me show you. Oh my God. Okay, good Lord. These are the table grapes. We call these table grapes versus winemaking grapes. Obviously, they're very different. These table grapes are a lot bigger, and there's just a lot more of them. And even just look at the color difference. There is much more pigmentation, much darker color in these red grapes than in these red grapes. These grapes would make a really nice, big red wine. You can make wine out of table grapes, but it's just not gonna be as good. And why is that? So let's take a closer look. Grapes have skins, right? And for the winemaking grapes, they're going to be much thicker. This is good because it has that balance of those tannins, those polyphenols that make a wine pleasantly bitter, along with the really sweet juice on the inside. The table grapes have a very thin skin with not a lot of tannin. You really get this core, juicy, pulpy center. They are just better for snacking. Let's take a look inside too. Pretty good. This grape is mostly pulp, and pulp is sugar and water, essentially. Both of these are important for the fermentation process that comes later, but makes it very sweet. Winemaking grapes actually have such thick skins that you really can just peel them. So yeah, much thicker skins. Even if you just rub these skins between your finger, you can start getting a little bit of pigmentation from there. Kind of crazy. All right. The other biggest differences are the seeds. This was the seed from this Concord. The seeds also contain these bittering agents that are really helpful for balanced winemaking. As opposed to the table grapes, you can see the little seeds there. They look a little more anemic. They look a little more sad. But these are hard and not very enjoyable to eat. These you can bite right through, no problem. Just imagine this with me. You would take these grapes, you would smoosh them in a bucket and let the bucket sit there. That's just how sort of the first wine has been made, right? But what really starts fermentation? What's the process? When does this and the grape juice really turn into wine, an alcoholic product? To ferment anything, you need two things to start, which is sugar and yeast. We said that sugar you can find in the pulp of the grape, so we're covered on that. So where do we find yeast? These days in most commercial wineries, you can buy yeast just from scottlaboratories.com or wherever. You can just buy this yeast and use it for winemaking. That is what we call commercial yeast. Some winemakers will use what they call native yeasts, or yeast that just exist on the planet. Yeast just lives out there in the world, and sometimes it attaches to grapes. And you can see here that you can even rub off some of this yeast from some of these grapes. Yeah, sometimes it's a little bit of dirt as well, but there is yeast in there. And if you were just to crush this and put it in a bucket, the yeast on the skins would start that fermentation process. So yeah, first wine ever, you would just crush it. Wine today, you probably would buy some yeast from the store. Once the yeasts and sugars are done making out, smooching, kissing, they make carbon dioxide and alcohol. The carbon dioxide just releases into the atmosphere, but sometimes people want that carbon dioxide to create sparkling wines. And that leads us right into what kind of wines can you make by doing this? What are the two most common types of wine? The first kind of wines are called still wines, and when you think of wine, this is probably what you think of. The majority of wines fall into this category, and many wines are still named after the region that they are made in. Europe in particular loves doing this. So if the wine was made in Sancerre, France, which is a region in France, the wine would be called Sancerre. Think of other examples like a place called Rioja in Spain. The wine is called Rioja, or even Chianti from Italy. Other wines, mostly found outside of Europe, are named after the grape that they are made with. Think of Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay, things like that. Aside from still wines, there are sparkling wines. You know, bubbles, fizzy wines, delicious fizzy wines, and the bubbles are caused by the carbon dioxide release during the fermentation process. And either it escapes into the stratosphere or you could potentially bottle it that way as well. And so when you open the sparkling wine, the gas is released as bubbles through the wine. Sparkling wines are made from all over the world, but you're probably the most familiar with Cava from Spain, Prosecco from Italy, and Champagne from France. Aside from the two types of wine, there's also styles of wine. Styles of wine include red wines, white wines, rosés, and I'm even gonna throw natural wines in there as well, because it's such a popular topic these days. And now you can kind of see how this can easily turn into a very deep dive conversation about winemaking and regions and why they're important, but I really wanted this just to be a nice introductory video to what is wine. So again, I could keep going, but I'm gonna do these wines a much better service by breaking it up into other videos. So I hope this was helpful for you just to wet your whistle a little bit about what is wine, and I hope it kickstarts your journey.